Hey, what's up, Street Dogs? Eric Kim. So, one thought I wanted to share with you is, essentially what is the cause of depression? So, I think depression is probably one of the world's biggest problems currently in modern life. And I think people who become depressed, it's not because they have some sort of genetic defect which makes them depressed, nor is it because they aren't trying hard enough. I think my thought is, I'm sure there's a genetic predisposition, you might be more likely to get depressed or whatever, but I think ultimately, perhaps my theory is depression is a physiological issue. So let me explain. So I do believe that there's a certain genetic predisposition, certain peoples are probably more likely to get depressed or whatever, but that's a predisposition. That's just a weight that that influences the thing. But ultimately, the cause, once again, we're thinking about the cause of depression. It certainly must be social, environmental, physiological, meaning pertaining to the body. I don't actually think that depression is a mental issue. So let me explain. So first and foremost, I can certainly tell you that I've been depressed in the past, and it's not the type of extreme clinical depression that people get where they literally cannot get out of bed. And once again, I don't think it's a matter of people lacking willpower or something like that. I think it's just there's some sort of dysfunction happening in your body which prevents you from moving. So once again, some people with clinical depression, it's a physiological depression in your body where you cannot move. So if we think about the root cause, probably what is the root cause? So let me just share with you some theories that have. First and foremost, I think modern society, the way it's structured right now, causes us to become depressed. Because consider, no children are ever depressed, right? Children just love to have fun. They're having the time of their lives and stuff like that. And they're playing so much and they're enjoying themselves so much and they're living so freely and uninhibited. I've never met a kid with depression. And I think that's kind of, someone might prove me wrong, but I think for the most part, I think we could agree that generally speaking, kids don't have depression. It's adults who have depression, right? So first of all, I'm not going to talk about teenage years or college years because that's it's a little bit too much in the past. Let me talk about kind of being more of an adult, ages 21 and up. So actually, even looking at my personal friends or my age group, so I'm 32, I was born in 1988, and it seems that as my friends or people I know have become employed in the 9-to-5 sector or whatever, or even working in these tech companies, everyone seems to slowly develop some sort of kind of a combination of nihilism towards life. And I think it's just kind of modern day living where it encourages us to, drink a lot of alcohol, for us to, smoke a lot of weed, do weird drugs and whatever. And now, I don't think alcohol or weed or drugs, I don't think it's necessarily a moral evil, but it certainly does something physiological to our body. It changes our bodies and our minds somehow. And, if you think that depression is having the inability to move, then you think, what is the prime mover? What motivates us to move? So I have some theories. First of all, modern society is structured in a way which necessitates us to move. So I think to be human is to walk and to move. And even the word motivation, it actually just literally means to move. Motus, movus, whatever, I'm just making up words. It means to move. And so motivation is just having the energy to move. And consider, right? Like most of us were like commuting via car or train or whatever. The only movement you gotta do is like to your car, to work, around lunch break, to your car, home, sit down. Like it's actually kind of like the worst existence. It's like we're living like in a golden cage, right? And I think generally speaking, our genetic predisposition is for us to like be out in the open, to enjoy light, to get the photosynthesis from the light, to walk like, I don't know, 10 to 15, 20 miles a day. I don't know the exact number. Every once in a while for us to sprint. For us, and actually I think this is another theory too, is that like most of the time, like we didn't have access to 3 steady meals a day. We're probably more genetically predisposed to, we could perform better where we do more intermittent fasting. Like I'm sure ancient humans, like we'd go like a week without food, and then once we had food we would gorge like insane. But I think most of the time humans are probably hungry, and just a way that I personally combat that in just like modern day life is that I'm a huge proponent of intermittent fasting, so I don't eat breakfast or lunch, and I just eat one massive dinner, which is very heavy on eggs and like collard greens or kale. And actually, intermittent fasting has insanely improved my mood, because like actually when I have a big breakfast or a lunch, like for example, I go to a hotel or something and they got free breakfast, and of course I can't say no to free food. So I'll eat like 10 to 12 eggs, a bunch of bacon, whatever, and I'll just have food come with the rest of the day. Food really does play a lot with our physiology and our bodies. And this is a problem too, is like with Western thinking, we think it's all in the mind. So it's like, oh, I'm depressed, it's something dysfunctional in my brain. But if we take the ancient Chinese or the Asian notion, health starts from the feet upwards, which means like even movement, right? For us to walk and move. It's originated in the legs. Right? Like the reason why us humans were kind of bipeds, right? Apparently we've evolved to be bipeds because it allows us to walk longer distances with less fatigue. So there's even a theory that like, early humans used to kill animals by just outrunning them to death or out walking them to death, whatever it may be. So, us, and then the most unnatural thing to do is for us to sit down on our butts. It kind of makes no sense, right? Like even if you look at like kind of more like traditional societies, like Asians and stuff like that, they do the Asian squat, right? Where you kind of like squat down. You don't really actually sit in chairs. Like that's like a very modern Western notion. And if you're gonna take a nap, you don't sit down. You just lie down on your back. You take a nap. So the problem is our modern life and our genetic predisposition to live this like kind of hunter-gatherer lifestyle is kind of all out of whack. So the question is, what is we to do about it, right? Because for the most part, we can't change the way that modern day capitalism or consumerism or society is structured. But I mean, there's some very, very pragmatic things you could do about it. So the first question is, how much do you care and what are you willing to sacrifice? So I'll give you examples. Like, so for me, ever since I was a kid, right? Like, I've always valued freedom. Freedom was actually my number one thing as a kid. So like, I actually remember like the second I turned 15 or 15 and a half in California, I got my driver's permit. And then once I got 16, got my license immediately. And getting my first car was the best thing ever. I bought a 1991 Sentra 4-door 5-speed XE in white. My mom helped me get it from a mechanic in Oakland named Kevin, and I got it for $1,200. The money I earned myself by building computers from parts on Newegg and selling it to people in my school and stuff like that. And it was so great having that car because it wasn't even about the car as a car. It's more of this like vehicle or this symbol of freedom. And it was true, like once I had a car, like I'm 16 years old, right? That freedom is amazing, right? So the freedom is amazing. You could go anywhere and you could go anywhere and do anything. And I never really cared to have like a fancy car. Like I looked at all these other kids at school who drove BMWs. I'm like, you guys all a bunch of tools, right? So, Eric at 16 was kind of like one of the most free-spirited individuals of all time. So I almost wonder if like depression is kind of like over time we become tamed and domesticated by our bosses, modern society, whatever, to essentially we kind of fall victim to learned helplessness. Is that like, my life sucks, I have no control or freedom in my life, what am I to do? Nothing. I'm just gonna feel like shit. And then slowly over time you don't walk, you don't stand, your metabolism kind of changes because you're not standing so much, you're not exercising so much. And essentially I think depression is not this. Depression is your body. Your body becomes depressed, and then your mind is kind of like, the signals going to your mind is kind of a little bit out of whack. You're like, whoa, my body feels weird. What is the issue? So I think maybe the root cause of depression in modern day society is lack of freedom, lack of movement, and lack of freedom to do whatever you want to do. So it seems that the only solution to this, truth be told, is to become self-employed, to just become your own boss. And I think another corollary of that is that don't have a boss, but also don't have employees. Because once you have employees, you got to manage them, right? And those of you guys who manage people know that like it's an insane amount of work to even try to manage other people, and that's just kind of like waste of time in your mind. So it seems like the ideal life, and then it's not possible for everyone, which is really sad, but I think this is the truth, is once you become self-employed, you could become the most epic human being possible. And like obviously there's cases where you can still do great things while having a typical job. So like even Einstein worked effectively he worked at the DMV, he worked at the Swiss patent office. He would work minimum amount of work necessary not to get fired, and then the rest of the day he would just theorize. So I think that's actually another theory, is that like, if you don't love your job, just treat it like a job, right? Like there's no shame in having a job. It's just like, just treat it like a job, do the minimum amount of work necessary not to get fired, and then beyond that, just pursue your own artistic or intellectual habits. Like even Nassim Taleb, he worked as a trader on Wall Street for like, until he was like in his 40s or 50s, before he was able to get enough fuck you money to just kind of fuck off and do whatever he wanted, right? So once again, it seems like the first primary goal is to become self-employed, to become your own boss, and to have no one to report to, nor to have anyone dependent on you either. It seems like it goes both ways, right? You don't want to be a boss, you don't want a boss, but you also don't want to be nobody else's boss, right? You don't want to be a worker, and you also don't want to have any workers. So you become the solo you. Taking it back to depression, right? So, I mean, just some certain suggestions that I got is, all right. So taking it back to depression. I've actually, whenever like I spend too much time in the suburbs where I'm not allowed to walk, I actually get really depressed. And so once again, I don't think it's our fault. It's just like society. So like, for example, I mean, the first very pragmatic thing I could change is that like, you can't change your emotions, you can't change the way you feel, but you could change your environment. So essentially getting a job or moving or living somewhere which actually necessitates for you to walk or allows you to walk. So, move to a city that essentially allows you to walk. Other thoughts is, let's say, you got some money saved up, let's say you work in Silicon Valley or whatever, and then you're feeling depressed, whatever. Honestly, I would just like fuck off, go to like Vietnam, Mexico City, those are my two favorite places. In Vietnam, go to Hanoi or Saigon, both is good, or go to Mexico City. And just, take a year off and just kind of like enjoy your freedom and just have a chance to think about your life. Don't get stuck in that 9 to 5 rat race, right? And also, a very simple thing too is that if we think about depression as physiological, then it means, you know, like, so, you know, I've felt depressed in the past. But the funny thing is, when I'm attempting a new PR 1 rep max, my deadlift, squat, or whatever, for half a second when I'm attempting the maximum attempt and the charge up and before and after, I physically cannot even feel depressed because you're so focused on the task at hand. So I almost wonder if, like, just in modern day life, we just need more physiological challenges. So sumo deadlifts, going for a 1 rep max, and also, you know, just like, and then this is something that's a little more difficult. Just try to stand or walk as much as you can. So a simple thing is, you got a job, right? Ask for a standing desk, or even what I do at home is I just put a plastic Tupperware box on top of my kitchen counter, and then I put like some Bounty towel rolls and just put my laptop on top of it. Super duper ghetto. You can just get a cardboard box. You don't need the $1,000 standing desk. I mean, if your office could get it for you, that's cool. But I really do think that the more you could stand, the more you could walk, the better. Also, just kind of consider, right? Like, health or happiness maybe starts from the feet downwards, which means the longer you stand, the longer you move, the stronger your legs. Probably you'll be happier and in a better mood. So once again, other things you could do: start intermittent fasting, don't eat breakfast or lunch. I think it's a good way for you to clear your metabolic pathways. That's a useful thing. Simple things too: cut out sugars, carbs out of your diet. Maybe even, you know, cut out alcohol or weed or whatever drugs out of your diet, just to kind of see how you feel otherwise. This is kind of a bad suggestion. This is all me, but just drink more black coffee, no cream, no sugar. I mean, coffee always seems to improve my mood. Or even, like, you go on Amazon, search like 100% cacao powder. That shit's good. Kind of gives me a little mild buzz too. Drink a lot of water. Other tips too, like take cold showers. This is a funny thing too. Like, sometimes, like, when I've been depressed, I'll just take a cold shower. And dude, I could tell you, when you're taking a fucking cold shower and you're just fighting for your life in the shower, you cannot even will yourself to be depressed because your body is, like, you know, in survival mode. So, you know, think about it, like even our parents or our ancestors who are constantly in life or death mode, when you're in life or death mode, you cannot really feel depressed because, you know, you're in life or death mode. So I almost wonder if one of the causes of depression in modern day life is too simple, too predictable, too boring. So our life is never really in a life or death mode. So perhaps we have too much free time to think about our misery, and that's why, like, utilitarianism says the blessing of work, because when you're so busy working all the time and we don't have the time to think, you don't have time to think to even feel depressed. So once again, if you're feeling depressed, ain't your fault, blame society. But in your own life, try to figure out small ways you could tweak your life to make your life better. I mean, even a simple thing that's been helpful to me is living here in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a small city. I could walk everywhere. It's actually my new favorite city in America, and I love it too because I'm so much happier here because I'm walking more, talking to more people and stuff like that. Whereas if I'm in LA or stuck in the suburbs, I'm like, I get very, very depressed because either I'm stuck in a car for 3 hours a day, there's no sidewalk, so I can't walk. So, you know, people say grass is greener on the other side. And then people who say, oh, just be grateful for what you have. I think this whole, like, being grateful for what you have, this notion isn't 100% accurate. I do think that there actually are superior, more optimal environments or conditions for your personal thriving than other places, and also know that it's just dependent on other factors. So for me, living in Providence, Rhode Island, excellent. When I lived in Hanoi with Cindy for like 8 months in Vietnam, in Hanoi, that was great. Saigon, 3 months, that was also great. Did in Mexico City for a month, that was also great too. So honestly, just kind of switch up your environment, see if that helps. You know, if you can, take a mini sabbatical, take 3 to 6 months off work or even take a year off work. If you care about your mental health or your physiological health, it could be worth a shot. So once again, like, I don't know. Life is too short for us to feel shitty, and to will the shittiness away isn't something I really believe in. If we really do consider that it's a physiological thing, then perhaps we just need to change our society, change our environment, change our body, and then maybe things will work out.